You are standing in the middle of Salisbury Plain. The wind never stops here. In front of you, a ring of stones taller than 3 men, each one heavier than a fully loaded truck, standing exactly where someone placed them almost 5,000 years ago. And here is the thing nobody wants to say out loud. One of those stones should not be here. It came from a place so far away that moving it with the tools these people had should have been impossible. That is the claim I chased for 2 years. A single stone at the heart of Stonehenge that traveled a distance no ancient people were supposed to be able to cross. And when a team fed the data into modern analysis in 2024, the answer that came back broke every map anyone had ever drawn of this place. It started with a document published in the journal Nature on the 14th of August 2024, a geochemical fingerprint, something you can trace, test, and repeat. This is not a legend told around a fire. This is written in the rock itself, and once you see where that rock came from, you cannot unsee it. I remember the exact moment it hooked me. I was sitting in a cold kitchen at 2 in the morning reading an old survey report, and I saw a line that said the origin of one stone remained, quote, unresolved. I read that word 3 times. Unresolved. In a monument studied for 400 years. And I could not sleep. Let me back up, because to understand why that one stone is impossible, you have to understand what we already knew and how strange even the ordinary parts of Stonehenge really are. There are 2 kinds of stone at Stonehenge. Most people never learn this. They see one gray ruin and think it is all the same rock. It is not. There are the giant standing stones, the ones that form the famous outer ring and the huge horseshoe inside it. Those are called Sarsens. Some of them weigh as much as 30 tons. And then there are the smaller stones tucked between the giants, standing maybe 6 or 8 feet tall. Those are called blue stones. They look plain, gray, weathered, easy to walk past. But those small stones are where the whole mystery begins. Because in 1923, a geologist named Herbert Henry Thomas did something that changed everything. He studied the mineral makeup of the blue stones and matched them to a specific place. Not a general region, a specific range of hills in southwest Wales called the Preseli Hills. And the distance from those hills to Stonehenge is about 140 miles in a straight line, closer to 180. If you follow the land and water, any human being would actually have to sit with that number. These stones weigh between 2 and 4 tons each. There are more than 40 of them still at the site. And somebody moved every single one of them 180 miles across rivers, hills, and forest roughly 5,000 years ago, with no wheel in common use in Britain, no horses for hauling, no metal tools. Just stone, wood, rope, and human muscle. When I first read that, I told myself there had to be an easier answer. Maybe the ice did it. That was my first escape hatch, and I clung to it. Because there is a real scientific idea called glacial transport, the theory that ancient ice sheets picked up these Welsh stones and dumped them near Salisbury Plain, so the builders just grabbed whatever was lying around. That would make the whole thing ordinary. That would let me sleep. But the deeper I dug, the worse that theory looked. Because in 2015, a team led by an archaeologist named Mike Parker Pearson did not just guess where the blue stones came from. They found the actual quarries, 2 of them, one called Craig Rossi Phelan and one called Carn Godog, both up in those Preseli Hills. And at these sites, they found something that ends the ice argument cold. They found the tools. They found stone wedges still sitting on the rock. They found the recesses where long pillars of stone had been split away from the cliff face, natural vertical columns that these people had levered loose. They even found a stone platform at the base of one quarry, right where you would lower a heavy pillar down to load it for transport. And they carbon dated the charcoal and hazelnut shells left behind by the workers to around 3,000 years before the Common Era. That is roughly 5,000 years ago. That was the moment my easy answer died. You cannot argue that a glacier carried these stones when you can see the human quarry, the human tools, and the human campfire where the quarrymen ate lunch. People cut these stones. People carried them. The question was no longer if, it was how, and it was why. Why would anyone drag 2-ton rocks across most of a country when there were perfectly good stones lying around much closer to home? And that question is exactly what pulled me one level deeper, because the giant stones, the Sarsens, hit a second puzzle that took almost a century to crack. For most of modern history, nobody actually knew where the Sarsens came from. The big ones, the 30-ton monsters, everyone assumed they came from somewhere on the Marlborough Downs, maybe 20 miles north, because there are scattered Sarsen boulders lying on the surface up there even today. But assumed is not proven. And for a monument this famous, the gap in the record was almost embarrassing. We knew more about the small stones from Wales than the giant ones sitting right in front of us. Then something small and strange helped solve it. Back in 1958, during a restoration, engineers drilled a core sample out of one of the Sarsens, a stone cataloged as Stone 58, to help repair a crack. They pulled out a cylinder of rock about 1 meter long, and then that core sample vanished. For decades, nobody knew where it was. It sat forgotten while the mystery stayed open. Until a man named Robert Phillips, who had worked on that 1958 restoration, revealed he had kept the core. He had it mounted on a wall in his office in the United States for years, and in 2018, in his 90s, he decided to return it to Britain so it could finally be studied. That returned core became the key. A geologist named David Nash took that core and ran a detailed chemical analysis on it, checking the ratios of trace elements locked inside the rock, a kind of geological fingerprint. He compared the Sarsen to samples from all across southern England. And in July of 2020, in the journal Science Advances, he published the answer. 50 of the 52 remaining Sarsens share the same chemical signature, and that signature matches a place called West Woods near Marlborough, about 15 to 18 miles from Stonehenge. So now we had it. The small stones from Wales, 180 miles away. The giant stones from West Woods, closer, but still 15 miles of hauling 30-ton blocks across the landscape. And with those origins pinned down, I thought the location mystery was basically solved. 2 sources, both identified, case mostly closed. I was wrong. Because knowing where the stones came from only made the next question louder. How on earth did they shape them? Here is what stopped me in my tracks. Stonehenge is not a pile of rough boulders. It is engineered. The lintels, the stones that lie horizontally across the tops of the giant uprights, are held in place by joints borrowed from woodworking. There are mortise and tenon joints, a knob carved on top of the upright fitting into a hollow carved under the lintel, exactly like a carpenter joining 2 beams. There are tongue and groove joints locking the lintels to each other end to end. Now, think about what that means. Someone looked at a stone weighing several tons and decided to carve a precise knob on the top of it, then lift another multi-ton stone and drop it so the socket landed perfectly over that knob, more than 13 feet in the air. And they did it with stone hammers. No metal chisels, no cranes. It gets more precise. The tops of the outer lintels are level to within a few centimeters all the way around the ring, despite the ground beneath them sloping. To keep that ring level, the builders made the uprights on the lower ground slightly taller. They corrected for the slope of the earth. That is not instinct. That is measurement. And the lintels are not even straight. Each one is very slightly curved cut, so that when you set 30 of them end to end, they form a smooth circle rather than a jagged polygon. They pre-planned the geometry of the whole ring and then shaped each individual stone to fit its exact position in that circle. This is design thinking 5,000 years ago from people we are told had no writing and no mathematics. That was the point where the official timeline started to itch at me, because everything I read described these builders as simple Neolithic farmers, and simple farmers do not on a whim invent circle geometry, level a monument against the curvature of the ground, and import stone from a place they would have to be told existed. So I did what I always do when the story stops adding up. I went looking for the people who wanted the boring explanation more than I did, the professional skeptics. And I want to bring you right into that argument, because if you are sitting there thinking there is a simple answer to all of this, you are exactly where I was, and I owe you the honest version before I show you where it broke. The skeptics have a strong case, and I need you to hear it at full strength, because I believed it for a long time. Their argument goes like this: human beings are capable of astonishing feats of coordinated labor. We know from other cultures that large groups can move enormous weights with sledges, ropes, log rollers, and sheer determination. Experiments have been done. In 1994, a team moved a replica bluestone using a wooden sledge on a track, and it worked. Volunteers have dragged multi-ton concrete blocks across fields to prove it can be done. So the skeptics say there is no mystery here at all. Give enough people enough time and enough rope, and they can move anything. The precision joints, copied from their woodworking, which they already knew. The astronomy, farmers watch the sky because their survival depends on the seasons. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible, just patient, clever people doing what humans do. And you know what? That explanation is not stupid. It is the version I wanted to be true. For months, I told myself the mystery was only a mystery because we underestimate ancient people, and that once you respect their intelligence, the strangeness disappears. I even felt a little smug about it, like I had seen through the hype. But here is where it collapsed for me, and it collapsed on one specific detail. The moving experiments all cheat in the same quiet way. They move one stone on a prepared track, on flat ground, for a short distance. On a good day, and then everyone goes home. Nobody has ever replicated moving 40 stones, plus the giant Sarsens, across 180 miles of real terrain, over rivers, up and down hills, through forest, feeding the workforce for the months or years it would take, and then repeating it dozens of times. The proof of concept for one stone on a Sunday is not proof of the actual project, and the more I read the real logistics, the numbers stopped being inspiring and started being frightening, but that was still just the how. The skeptics can always say people are amazing, and I cannot fully disprove human effort. What finally broke me was not the how, it was the why, and then the where. Because the why has an answer buried in the rock that the simple farmer story cannot touch, and it led me straight to the discovery that ends this whole search. Let me give you the why first, because it is genuinely eerie. Why bluestones? Why go 180 miles for specific gray rocks from specific Welsh hills when Britain is full of stone? For a long time, nobody had a good answer. Then, researchers noticed something about the Preseli bluestones that most people have never heard. They ring. In 2013, a study around the village of Maen Clochog in Wales tested the local bluestone outcrops, and researchers found that many of the stones, when struck, produce a clear metallic ringing tone instead of a dull thud. They are what are called lithophones, ringing rocks. And here is the detail that raised the hair on my arms. Some of the actual bluestones at Stonehenge show unusual chipping and marks as if they had been struck, tested, or even played. The name of that Welsh village, Maen Clochog, translates roughly to ringing stones or bell stones. The local memory of these singing rocks survived in the place name itself. So the leading idea now is that these stones were not chosen for how they looked. They were chosen for how they sounded. Somebody in the Preseli Hills knew that these particular rocks sang, and that knowledge was valuable enough to justify hauling them across a country. That is not a farming decision. That is a cultural obsession, a belief system powerful enough to organize one of the largest transport projects of the ancient world around the sound a rock makes when you hit it. And that reframed the entire monument for me. Stonehenge might not be a temple of stones. It might be an instrument. A place built around sound and sky, engineered by people who traveled absurd distances to gather exactly the right materials because those materials meant something we have forgotten how to hear. And that reframed the entire monument for me. If you want to go even deeper into the kind of hidden systems and lost knowledge these builders carried with them, I have something for you before we continue. I have been putting the research behind cases like this one into a series of digital books: First Threshold, Deep Signal, and Hidden Systems, each one built around the same question this channel keeps asking. What did ancient people know that we have quietly stopped looking for? You can find all three at lostorigins.org, linked in the description. For $97, they go places a single video cannot. Now, with that in mind, let me bring you back to the stone that finally broke this case wide open. Once I accepted that these builders were deliberate, precise, and willing to cross the whole island for the right stone, the door was open for the discovery that finally answered why I could not sleep. Because in 2024, a team turned modern analytical tools, the same kind of high-precision dating and mineral matching now often described under the umbrella of computational and AI-assisted analysis, onto the one stone at Stonehenge that had never given up its secret. The stone lying flat in the very center, the one everybody walks past. The altar stone. The altar stone is strange in a dozen ways. It is a slab of greenish sandstone, about 16 feet long, weighing roughly 6 tons. It lies flat on the ground now, in the heart of the monument, half buried, with 2 of the giant fallen Sarsens lying across it. And for 100 years, everyone assumed it was just another Welsh stone, part of that same bluestone group from the Presely region. It got lumped in with the rest, case closed, or so they thought. But a few researchers had a nagging problem. The altar stone did not quite match the other Welsh bluestones. Its chemistry was off, it was a sandstone, and it was richer in certain minerals than the Welsh sources could explain. In 2023, a study specifically ruled out the old red sandstone of Wales as its source, which meant that after a century of assuming, we suddenly did not know where the central stone of Stonehenge came from. The heart of the monument had no home. That is when the deep analysis began, and this is the part I want to hand to you carefully, because it is the destination of everything. A team led by a researcher named Anthony Clark, working with Curtin University in Australia, along with British institutions, took tiny mineral grains from within the altar stone, specifically grains of zircon, apatite, and rutile. These minerals act like time capsules. Each grain locks in the radioactive age of the rock it originally formed in, sometimes hundreds of millions or even billions of years before it eroded into sand and became part of a sandstone. By dating hundreds of these individual grains, you get an age fingerprint, a pattern of dates as unique to a rock formation as a barcode. They dated the zircon grains and found ages clustering between 1,000 million and 2,000 million years old, with another set around 462 million years old. They ran the apatite and rutile too. Then they compared that barcode against sandstone formations across Britain and beyond, and the answer that came back did not point to Wales. It did not point anywhere in southern England. It did not point to anywhere near Salisbury Plain at all. It pointed to the Orcadian Basin, northeast Scotland, the far northern tip of the country, up near Inverness and possibly stretching toward the Orkney Islands themselves. I remember reading the distance number and actually standing up from my chair. The altar stone traveled at least 430 miles, roughly 750 kilometers from the northeast of Scotland to Salisbury Plain. That is nearly the entire length of the island of Great Britain. And they published it in Nature on the 14th of August, 2024, the exact document that had first stopped me cold with that word unresolved. Let that number settle the way it settled on me. 180 miles for the bluestones already sounded impossible, but this 6-ton slab came more than twice as far from the opposite end of an entire country, roughly 5,000 years ago. And it ended up not as some peripheral marker, but lying in the exact center of Stonehenge, the ceremonial heart of the whole design. Now think about what that forces us to accept. To bring a 6-ton stone 430 miles, these people had to know that northeast Scotland existed. They had to have a reason to want a stone specifically from there. They had to organize transport across mountains, rivers, and coastline, very possibly by sea, hauling a slab the weight of a small truck along the coast in vessels we have almost no record of. And they had to do it as a coordinated project linking the far north of Scotland to the far south of England, 2 places separated by the entire length of Britain, in an age we are told had no writing, no wheels in common use, and no unified nation. The researchers themselves said it plainly. The most likely way to move a 6-ton stone that distance was by sea along the coast, because dragging it overland across the Scottish Highlands and the length of England would have been even more punishing. which means these people had boats capable of carrying 6 tons of stone through open coastal water 5,000 years ago, and that alone rewrites what we thought Neolithic Britain was. This is the part that gives me chills every single time. It means Britain, at this incredibly early date, was not a scatter of isolated tribes who never saw beyond their own valley. It was connected. There were relationships, knowledge, and coordination spanning the whole island. Somebody in the south knew what the north had. Somebody organized a journey that, on foot along the coast, could take months to bring one specific stone to one specific place. The altar stone is proof of a network we did not believe existed, a Neolithic Britain far more sophisticated, more connected, and more mobile than the simple farmer story ever allowed. And here is what the official record still cannot answer, the thing that keeps this case open even now. We know where the stone came from. We do not know why. We do not know why that particular slab of Scottish sandstone was worth a journey across the length of Britain when the builders were already surrounded by their own imported Welsh stones and local giant Sarsens. Something about that specific stone from that specific place mattered enough to justify the single most extreme transport effort in the entire monument. And whatever that reason was, it died with the people who carried it. I keep coming back to the singing stones of Wales, to the idea that these builders chose materials not for how they looked, but for what those materials meant, for properties we barely register. If they crossed a country for stones that ring, what property, what meaning, what belief drove them to cross the entire island for a green slab of Scottish sandstone? We are looking at the physical evidence of an idea so powerful it moved 6 tons of rock the length of Britain, and we have completely lost the idea itself. That is the thing about Stonehenge that finally broke the boring answer for me for good. Every time science solves one piece, the solution reveals something even harder to explain. We found the quarries, and that proved humans did it, which made the distance worse. We found the Sarsen source, and that revealed the impossible engineering. We found the singing stones, and that revealed a culture obsessed with properties we forgot. And then we found the altar stone's true home, 430 miles north, and that revealed a connected, seafaring, coordinated ancient Britain nobody had drawn on any map. The stones did not get less mysterious as we studied them. They got more mysterious, and the answer to where the central stone came from only sharpened the question of who these people really were, because the ones who could have re-examined that assumption for a century simply did not. For 100 years, the altar stone was filed under Welsh and left alone, and everyone repeated it until a returned core, a fingerprint of mineral grains, and a team willing to actually test the old assumption finally cracked it open in 2024. So here is where I have landed after 2 years of chasing this down to the primary sources. Stonehenge is not a monument to how little ancient people knew. It is a monument to how much they knew that we have lost. They understood their island coast to coast. They understood geometry and level and the movement of the sun. They understood and cared about properties of stone we are only now rediscovering, and they built a structure so precisely and gathered its pieces from so far that our first instinct, even now, is to assume it could not have happened the way the evidence says it did. What we recovered is not just the origin of a stone, it is the ghost of a lost network. A Britain that was talking to itself across 430 miles when we thought its people barely left their fields. That truth was sitting in the center of the most studied monument on Earth the whole time, hidden inside a slab everyone walked over, waiting for someone to actually ask the rock where it was born. If you are the kind of person who has always felt the neat, tidy version of ancient history was hiding something, that the official answer was a little too comfortable, then you already understand why I could not let this one go. You do not accept unresolved as a period at the end of a sentence. You treat it as a door. So I want to hear from you. Knowing what you know now, that a 6-ton stone came the length of Britain to lie in the center of Stonehenge, what do you think that stone meant to them, and why that stone from that place? Tell me your theory in the comments. And tell me where in the world you are watching from, because I read them, and the best ideas I find down there send me chasing the next case. If you believe there are truths still buried inside the things we think we already understand, then you belong with the rest of us who keep reopening the files everyone else closed, because I have already found the next one. There is a place beneath the waves, off a coast, that should never have had a structure like this, where sonar picked up something with angles too sharp, too regular to be natural, sitting under water that was dry land at the end of the last ice age. And the official explanation for it is exactly the kind of comfortable answer that never sat right with me. Stay with me. You're still here, and that tells me something. This video gave you the overview, but inside the Unexplained Society, I pick up right where we just stopped. In there, you can ask me your own questions directly, a real person, me answering you myself. You won't be doing this alone. So many mystery lovers like you are already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. Cancel anytime, one click. Now, if Stonehenge left you wondering, wait until you see this. There's an even older mystery, and scientists just uncovered something they truly can't explain. It's starting right here. Come take a look with me.